Let's begin with a question that might feel uncomfortable. What if everything you've ever known about God was just the surface of a much deeper ocean? Think about it. Most people go through life with a vague sense of faith, a ritualistic approach to spirituality, or perhaps no belief at all. But then there are the few, the truly extraordinary individuals who seem to have tapped into something far beyond the rest of us. They live lives filled with purpose, clarity, and what appears to be an unshakable connection to the divine. Why? Why do they seem to understand something about God that the rest of us don't? Here's the truth. The power of God is not what you think it is. It's not just about praying for good fortune, going to a place of worship, or reading sacred texts. Those are doorways, certainly, but the real journey begins beyond them. The power of God is a force so immense and transformative that most people are too afraid to explore it. And that's why only the top 1%, the spiritual elite, manage to unlock it. Let's dive deeper into this, and not just because it's fun, but because I am very interested. The first thing you need to understand is that God is not a concept to be understood logically. God is not just a deity sitting somewhere in the heavens watching over us. That's a human projection, a simplification designed to make the infinite more palatable for the finite mind. The truth is, God is the source. God is the energy that flows through all things, the intelligence behind every atom, the silence behind every sound. And the reason only a few people truly grasp this is because they've realized something profound. To understand God, you must first understand yourself.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Pause for a moment and reflect on this. Who are you, really? Are you just your body, your thoughts, your emotions, or your achievements? Or are you something deeper, something eternal? The top 1%, those who truly understand the power of God, have asked themselves this question countless times, and, in doing so, they've discovered a secret. The essence of God and the essence of the self are one and the same. But here's the catch. This realization doesn't come easy. It requires a willingness to dismantle everything you think you know about yourself and the world. It's a process of unlearning, of letting go. And most people aren't ready for that. They cling to their identities, their beliefs, their comforts, because the alternative, stepping into the unknown, is terrifying. So here's a challenge for you. Are you willing to let go of who you think you are in order to discover the truth? The spiritual elite are not born extraordinary. They are not chosen by divine lottery. They are ordinary people who made an extraordinary decision to surrender to the mystery of life. They stopped trying to control everything, stopped trying to fit God into a box, and instead opened themselves up to the infinite possibilities of existence. This brings us to the second key insight about the power of God. It is not something you acquire, it is something you become. Think about the greatest spiritual figures in history: Jesus, Buddha, Rumi, Lao Tzu. What made them extraordinary was not their intellect, charisma, or even their teachings. It was their state of being. They embodied divinity. They became vessels for the infinite. And the reason they were able to do this is because they let go of the ego, the false self that clings to separation, fear, and control. Here's a practical exercise for you. The next time you feel overwhelmed, anxious, or disconnected, pause and ask yourself, what part of me is experiencing this? Is it your true self, the eternal observer within? Or is it your ego, the temporary identity that clings to fear and limitation? The top 1% understand that the ego is the greatest barrier to experiencing the power of God, and so they dedicate themselves to practices that dissolve the ego: meditation, prayer, service, and self-inquiry. These practices are not about escaping reality. They're about seeing reality as it truly is. Now, let's address a common misconception. Many people believe that experiencing the power of God means having mystical visions, hearing voices, or performing miracles. And while those things can happen, they are not the goal. The real power of God is far more subtle and far more profound. It's the quiet realization that you are not separate from anything or anyone. It's the deep peace that comes from knowing you are held by something infinitely greater than yourself. It's the unshakable clarity that allows you to navigate life with grace and purpose. But here's the paradox: you can't seek this power. You can only create the conditions for it to emerge. It's like planting a seed. You can't force it to grow, but you can provide the soil, water, and sunlight it needs to flourish. So, how do you create these conditions? Start by asking yourself, what am I holding on to that no longer serves me? It could be a belief, a habit, a relationship, or even a dream. Whatever it is, let it go. Trust that by releasing the old, you make space for the new. And this brings us to the final point for this part of the journey. Faith is the key that unlocks the door to divine power. But let's redefine faith here. Faith is not blind belief in something outside of yourself. It's the courage to trust in the unknown, the willingness to surrender to the flow of life. It's saying, I don't have all the answers, but I trust that the answers will reveal themselves when the time is right. So, let me leave you with one last question. What would your life look like if you truly trusted in the power of God? Think about it. What would you do differently? How would you show up in the world? Pause for a moment and ask yourself, am I living in alignment with the flow of life, or am I swimming against it? This question is profound because it cuts right to the core of why so many people fail to experience the true power of God. They resist the flow. They cling to control, fight against uncertainty, and struggle to force outcomes. But here's the truth that the top 1% of spiritually awakened individuals understand. God's power flows effortlessly through those who surrender to it. What does it mean to align with the divine flow? To answer this, let's explore the nature of life itself. Look at the universe. Everything in existence operates in perfect harmony. The planets orbit the sun without effort. Rivers flow to the ocean without resistance. Trees grow, flowers bloom, and seasons change, all without anyone forcing them to happen. This is the divine flow, the natural rhythm of creation. It's a force that is always moving, always guiding, always creating. And here's the secret. You are a part of this flow. But most people have forgotten this. They disconnected from the flow because they bought into the illusion of separation. They believe they're isolated individuals who must work, strive, and struggle to survive. They've built walls around themselves. Walls of fear, doubt, and control. And these walls block the flow of divine energy. So how do you break down these walls? How do you realign yourself with the infinite potential of God? It begins with one word: surrender. Surrender is the magic word that scores outside the parameters of time, space, and destiny. Now, surrender doesn't mean giving up or becoming passive. It's not about resigning yourself to a life of mediocrity or avoiding responsibility. True surrender is the ultimate act of courage. It's choosing to let go of your need to control everything and trusting that the universe knows what it's doing. It's stepping into the unknown with faith that you are guided by something greater than yourself. But surrender is hard because it requires you to face your fears, and fear is the greatest barrier to alignment with the divine flow. Fear makes you cling to what's familiar, even when it no longer serves you. Fear convinces you that you must fight and struggle to get what you want. Fear keeps you small, disconnected, and out of sync with the infinite. So here's a question for you. What are you afraid of letting go? Is it your desire for control, your attachment to a specific outcome, your fear of failure or rejection? Whatever it is, I want you to imagine what would happen if you released it. What if you stopped clinging and instead allowed life to unfold naturally? What if you trusted that the same force that moves the stars in the sky is also guiding you? Is this your expectation? Whether isn't met or simple, you would faith what life throws at me. When you surrender, something miraculous happens. You begin to feel the flow of life again. You start to notice synchronicities, those seemingly random events that align perfectly to guide you toward your highest good. You experience a sense of ease, as if the weight of the world has been lifted off your shoulders. And most importantly, you begin to tap into the infinite potential of God. This potential is not something outside of you. It's the divine power that resides within you, waiting to be awakened. But you can only access it when you're in alignment with the flow. Imagine a river. When you try to swim against the current, you exhaust yourself and make no progress. But when you surrender to the current, the river carries you effortlessly to your destination. The same is true of the divine flow. When you stop resisting and start aligning, you tap into a power far greater than your own. Here's a practical way to begin aligning with the divine flow. Listen deeply. The universe is always speaking to you, but most people are too busy, distracted, or anxious to hear it. Take time each day to sit in silence and simply listen. Pay attention to the subtle nudges, the quiet whispers of intuition, the signs and synchronicities that show up in your life. These are the ways God speaks to you, guiding you toward alignment. Another key to alignment is gratitude. When you focus on what you're grateful for, you shift your energy from lack to abundance. Gratitude is like a magnet that attracts more blessings into your life. It's a way of saying to the universe, I trust in your flow. I see the beauty and perfection in all things. And when you live in this state of gratitude, you naturally align with the divine flow. But alignment is not just about listening and being grateful, it's also about action. The top 1% understand that surrendering to the flow doesn't mean sitting back and waiting for things to happen. It means taking inspired action. This is action that comes from a place of trust and intuition, not fear or desperation. When you're aligned with the flow, you'll feel a sense of clarity and peace about what steps to take. You'll know deep in your heart that you're being guided. Let me ask you this. What would your life look like if you stopped forcing and started flowing? Imagine waking up every day with a sense of purpose and ease, knowing that you're exactly where you're meant to be. Imagine feeling deeply connected to the infinite potential of God, trusting that everything is unfolding perfectly. Imagine this is not just a dream, it's your birthright. You were born to live in alignment with the divine flow. You were born to co-create with the infinite. But you must make the choice to surrender, to trust, and to align. So as we move forward, I want you to reflect on this. What steps can you take today to realign with the flow of life? Maybe it's letting go of something you've been holding on to. Maybe it's taking time to listen to your intuition. Or maybe it's simply saying, I surrender. I trust. And let me ask you something that might change the way you view your own life. What if the power of God was not something you needed to seek, but something that's already within you, waiting to be awakened? You see, the top 1%, those rare individuals who seem to live in harmony with God's infinite power, aren't special because they were chosen. They're special because they chose to discipline their minds, bodies, and spirits to stay in alignment with this power every single day. Understanding the power of God is one thing, but staying connected to it, that's an entirely different game. And this is where most people stumble. They have glimpses of God's presence, perhaps during a moment of prayer in nature or through a life-altering experience, but they don't know how to sustain it. They fall back into old habits, distractions, and illusions. But the spiritual elite have mastered specific practices that allow them to remain in constant connection with the divine flow. These practices aren't mystical secrets reserved for a chosen few. They're available to all of us, but they require commitment, discipline, and intention. Let's explore these practices together, starting with one of the most misunderstood yet transformative tools: silence. When was the last time you truly sat in silence? Not scrolling through your phone, not planning your day, but simply being. Silence is where the voice of God becomes audible. It's where the noise of the world fades away and the still, small voice of the divine can be heard. The spiritual elite understand that silence is not an absence of sound, it's a presence of awareness. They dedicate time every day, sometimes hours, to sitting in stillness, emptying their minds, and allowing the divine flow to move through them. Here's a challenge for you. Dedicate just 10 minutes a day to silence. No distractions, no agenda, just you, breathing and being. At first, your mind will resist. It will throw thoughts at you like a toddler throwing a tantrum. But if you persist, something incredible will happen. You'll begin to feel a profound sense of peace, clarity, and connection. You'll realize that silence is not empty. It's full of God's presence. The second practice the elite use is intentional gratitude. We touched on gratitude earlier, but let's go deeper. Gratitude is not just a fleeting emotion, it's a spiritual discipline. The top 1% don't just say thank you when good things happen, they cultivate a lifestyle of gratitude, even in the face of challenges. They understand that gratitude is a frequency, a vibration that aligns them with the divine flow. Here's a practical way to practice gratitude. Every morning, write down 3 things you're grateful for. But don't stop there. take a moment to feel the gratitude in your body. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the feeling of thankfulness wash over you. This simple practice rewires your brain, shifts your energy, and opens you up to receive more of God's blessings. IB10 with a reformation. Next, let's talk about prayer. But I'm not referring to the kind of prayer most people are familiar with, the kind that's filled with requests, bargaining, or scripted words. The spiritual elite approach prayer differently. For them, prayer is a conversation, a communion, a two-way dialogue with the divine. It's not about asking for things, it's about aligning their will with God's will. Have you ever prayed? Not to ask for something, but simply to listen? One of the most powerful prayers you can say is, "God, show me what I need to know." Then sit in stillness and wait for the answer. It might come as a thought, a feeling, or even a synchronicity later in the day. The key is to remain open and receptive. Another hidden practice the elite use is service. They understand that the power of God flows most freely through those who use it to uplift others. Service is not just about helping others, it's about dissolving the ego. When you serve, you step out of your own self-centered concerns and align with the greater good. You become a vessel for divine love, and in doing so, you experience God's power on a deeper level. Ask yourself, how can I be of service today? It doesn't have to be grand or dramatic. It could be as simple as offering a kind word, helping a stranger, or reaching out to someone in need. When you serve with no expectation of reward, you tap into a wellspring of divine energy that nourishes your soul. Finally, let's talk about faith in action. Faith is not just a belief, it's a way of life. The spiritual elite don't just trust in God when things are going well, they trust even when everything seems to be falling apart. They understand that faith is like a muscle. It grows stronger the more it's exercised. And the best way to exercise faith is by taking inspired action. Are there areas of your life where you've been hesitating, doubting, or holding back? What would happen if you took a step forward, trusting that God would meet you halfway? Faith in action is about moving forward, even when the path isn't clear, with the knowledge that you are guided and supported to proceed in spite of what the internal doubts and fears. Here's a powerful affirmation to practice. I trust in the divine flow. I take inspired action, knowing that God's power is working through me. Repeat this to yourself whenever fear or doubt creeps in. Now let's put all of this together. Silence, gratitude, prayer, service, and faith in action. These are not one-time practices or occasional rituals. They are a way of life. The spiritual elite understand that staying connected to God's power requires daily commitment. They treat these practices like a workout for the soul, knowing that the more consistent they are, the deeper their connection becomes. So, let me ask you this. How committed are you to living in constant connection with God's power? What would your life look like if you made these practices a non-negotiable part of your day? Take a moment to imagine this. What would your life look like if you fully embodied the infinite power of God? Not just glimpsing it in fleeting moments, not just understanding it intellectually, but truly becoming a living vessel for divine energy. What if every thought, action, and word you spoke carried the weight of God's love, wisdom, and creation? This is not just a lofty idea, it's the ultimate destiny for those who commit to walking the spiritual path. The top 1%, the spiritual elite, don't just understand the power of God, and they don't stop at aligning with it. They go one step further. They allow themselves to become vessels for it. This means they no longer separate themselves from God's power. They realize that they are the expression of that power, and they live their lives as instruments for its work in the world. In the process, they live a life in which to birth is a natural. But let's clarify something important. To truly embody God's power doesn't mean you become superhuman in the way most people think. It's not about gaining control over others, performing miracles to impress, or achieving worldly status. Instead, it's about radiating a presence so pure, so aligned, that it transforms not only you, but everyone and everything you encounter. So, how does this embodiment happen? It begins with complete surrender to the present moment. Think about it. The present moment is the only place where God's power can fully flow through you. The past is gone, the future is uncertain, but here, in this moment, you have access to the infinite. The spiritual elite understand this deeply, and they train themselves to live fully in the now. They let go of regrets about the past and worries about the future, trusting that every moment is exactly as it should be. Ask yourself, how often am I truly present in my life? If you find yourself constantly distracted, thinking about what's next, buried in your phone, or stuck in your own thoughts, then you're cutting yourself off from the flow of divine energy. To embody God's power, you must train yourself to be here, now. Another key to embodiment is purity of intention. When you act, are you doing so from a place of love, or are you motivated by fear, pride, or selfish desires? The spiritual elite remain vigilant about the energy behind their actions. They understand that God's power cannot flow through intentions that are tainted by ego. Here's a challenge. Before you make any decision, ask yourself, am I acting from love or fear? If it's fear, step back, breathe, and realign. When you act from love, whether it's in your work, relationships, or personal pursuits, you open yourself as a vessel for divine power. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of embodying God's power is this: you become a light for others. The energy you radiate inspires and uplifts those around you. You don't have to preach or persuade. Your presence alone becomes a beacon of hope and transformation. The spiritual elite don't live solely for themselves. They live to serve, to heal, and to awaken others. So let me leave you with this question. What would it mean for you to become a vessel for God's power? What impact could you have on your family, your community, and the world if you allow divine energy to flow through you freely? The truth is, you don't have to wait for some future moment to begin. The power of God is already within you, waiting to be awakened. All it takes is your willingness to trust, to surrender, and to align yourself fully with the divine flow. Your life is your canvas, and God's power is the paint. What masterpiece will you create? The journey doesn't end here. It begins now,